Elga Salvador holds a master's degree in environmental engineering from the University of Geneva in Italy and a PhD in the field of hydrological modeling from Free University of Brussels in Belgium. Elga, she is currently a lecturer at IHE Delft Institute for Water Education Netherlands, where she teaches short courses on water accounting and remote sensing for water resources management. She is also a guest professor at Free University of Brussels in Belgium, where she teaches environmental programming, water resources engineers. So we are going to be learning a lot today from Elga, and we are going to be well educated about water issues. So Elga, please join me to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I would like to just say how much honored I am to be here today to give this talk. Thank you for the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation for organizing this, the organizing committee, which has been great so far, and FAO also for inviting me here. I've been thinking a lot about research and innovation in water scarcity, and I think one of the keywords I came across is access. So I made my presentation a bit less technical, more discussing the dimension of access. I think research and innovation in this field should look at more things than just data and research, and we should help in solving problems. So I have a question for you, let's see if I can. Here, okay. Let's imagine you have, you want to support your community, you have enough resources, and you're building the most modern library. You can imagine you put all the books are needed, and then you open your library and your library is empty. So nobody's coming to your library. And then you realize, well, oh, I forgot the library card. Nobody knows about it, and I didn't give this to anybody. Imagine you do that, you give this card, so you give access to your library, but are you sure, basically, or your community is able to read? Can they read? And they read books. Do they read books in 2019? Or are maybe better ways to communicate information to people? And I think this is a very simple example, but also works in our field. I think as a scientist, as an engineer, I'm very passionate and I care a lot about making books and making data and making graphs, but who's benefiting from this? It's just my people, and so only the researchers that can benefit from this. So I should think more of sharing this with others, and maybe sharing my knowledge with others, and making sure people can read, or that I can communicate in the right way with people. I think yesterday also we talked a lot about SDGs and how much those indicators are important and they are interconnected. And I also here I looked at the access word, and I was looking at access to water. SDG 6, the first one, and we want universal and equitable access. But how do we ensure equitable, universal access water for all? In my view, it's not just about volumes of water. It is certainly important. You need to have clean water for everybody, but if you want to achieve that, you need to look at access in many other directions. So you need to make sure that the right stakeholder, the right person has access to data, and accurate data and information, but also have access to knowledge, and they have access to the tools, to the technology, should be accessible. I think research and innovation should look at all the steps. I think we should work and innovate in many different aspects of the whole process if we want to get an impact, if we want to make sure that things will change. I think, so in my presentation I will touch a bit of these topics separately. So the first thing I think of when I think of innovation, accurate data, like my previous colleagues have discussed, is remote sensing, Earth observation. Of course, it's a great, gives me a great joy that there is a lot of talk about this, and it's not new. I did a little research and I looked, okay, already almost a century ago, they were talking about having Earth observation, satellites, sending something to space. And then 30 years later, they sent the first satellite. So Sputnik 1 was the first one looking down at Earth and giving us data. And I was looking in time, I think there is being an amazing progress there. And in 2018, they talk about almost 700 satellites, just for Earth observation or for Earth science. I think this is amazing, and it's an amazing improvement. Data is becoming more accurate, meaning that nowadays it's comparable or even superior to some traditional type of measurements. We get spatial coverage, like previous speakers were talking about, were showing. The detail is getting impressive in terms of resolution. You get data every meter. You get temporal high resolution, meaning you have constellation of satellites, and then you get information every hour or so on the same place on Earth, and you get a lot of data for every location. It's not just one data point, so we have a lot more. And it's becoming diverse, meaning we don't just measure, let's say, soil property, or we look at different soil type or land cover, but we also look at other parameters, rainfall, for water management, we look at ET, and so on. One great thing is they're becoming much more affordable in terms of price. Most of this data nowadays comes for free, and we can just download and use. Let's see, a little bit downside is maybe large data sets. It requires computation, it's heavy, and it's maybe complicated. This is a little bit my work at IHE Delft. So what we do in our team, the water accounting group, we look at different remote sensing data, different products, all from open source, open access data, and we combine this to try to get a picture of water resources conditions. So I think you have heard already about the rainfall, so I don't have to spend much time in there. I think ET, evapotranspiration, has been discussed today. Also yesterday you've seen the VAPO database, which is great. It gives you data up to 30-meter resolution that you can use, but also other ET products are available. You can make comparison there. Biomass, you can try to estimate the crop production for every pixel. Soil moisture, water levels to understand your storage, and I'm so happy the chairman was talking about Grace today, about groundwater. I think that's also amazing. I think there is a lot of, so my message to you is please try to explore as much as possible. There is so much information there. Of course, it's not so simple. So, I was looking at, I thought, okay, are we actually using remote sensing for water scarcity research? So I did a simple check. I was looking at Google Scholar. I made a research and I thought, okay, how many documents to speak about water scarcity in the past 30, 50 years? And how much talk about remote sensing and water scarcity? And of course, it's a little bit less, but it's going very much up. Many reasons. Water scarcity becoming more important, but also the fact that more people publish and documents are more available and so on. And then I look also the percentage. Okay, how much of these water scarcity documents, what is the percentage that also talks about remote sensing? And is also going up, and nowadays is 2019, about 17% of these documents. Meaning good, remote sensing is more into the water scarcity discussion, but there is space for more. We have, who is using the data? So who is using remote sensing data? I think yesterday I heard a very nice sentence, talking about scientists. We basically talk to each other instead of talking to others. It's still for us, this data. So mostly it's used in research and academia. You do development, testing, modeling, validation, and so on. And sometimes we go more in the application. We look at case studies, pilot cases, because we want to convince that this, or want to check, and we want to make sure that this is useful. And then a little bit less in using this data for water management plans and decision making. I think we need to make a change there. I think it's not enough. I think most of our effort goes into research and academia, and I think we should push more the use of innovative tools and data also in the decision-making process. Why not? Why is it so difficult? Why we can't just make use of this data? Again, the access. For me, access to data doesn't just mean that you can download it. There is a lot more. It's a bigger process there. I think remote sensing is still technically difficult, it's still a bit challenging, and data is not the same as information. So there is a bit of a process in between, going from data to actual information and support decision making. In my experience, I travel a lot around the world in many countries. I think there is still in some cases, administrations and governments still have a bit of resistance to this. They don't trust the data. They still prefer to use, maybe they have too much confidence, in my view, on ground measurements and modeling software. And also that is not perfect. You have uncertainty which are just there, and you have to acknowledge they're there and try to find solution and basically live with that, or try to improve for the future. And of course some IT components. You need to have good computers, you need to have download and so on. We've done amazing progress from written records. This is a picture I took a couple of months ago, so some people still do that and collect data on a piece of paper. Great, but not so useful. We went to nice digital records. We have sheets, but also there it's a lot of information, difficult to extract and see things. And now we want to go for remote sensing. We want to go data cubes and even more information. We need to find a way to make it more accessible. So these are a little bit my key points. So in my view, we should try to develop, and there's also something we are currently doing, more easy to use and easy to understand tools. And this means also moving from the classical software and desktop application, but having more cloud-based type of approaches and computation. But also, like the previous speakers were discussing, I think is a good direction, having indicators, looking at trend analysis, and also like targets. And approaches like water counting and water auditing, which are trying to support decision makers and try to make their life a little bit easier. More on the soft skills side, I think we need to increase knowledge and awareness. For example, I think this conference is a really nice platform for discussing and having conversation about new techniques and new tools, but also modern type of training. So we are doing a lot now, also at Daichi, in e-learning, but also virtual reality for water and water engineering, and also games. I think important is to learn by doing, so and have education which is actually linked to a need, and where we can provide maybe personalized curriculum. We are all different, so why we should all be trained the same way. I think there is space nowadays also for this. Just one word about water accounting, which is one of those tools. And I think maybe I can take the opportunity to invite you also for the afternoon. There will be a session specific on water accounting and something on my experience in teaching and the education in this field. So water accounting, it's a broad context, a broad topic. What we do at Daichi is called Water Accounting Plus, and it's a joint effort of many groups, so the Food and Agriculture Organization, EMI, and the World Water Assessment Program. And this framework is trying to make sense of data. We take remote sensing, we take global models and ground measurements, and we communicate information on water resources conditions on a river basin by means of like a little bit like financial sheets. In the financial world, we do accounting sheets, water sheets, where people can easily understand what's happening, who's consuming how much, which sector is more important. And then I had the great opportunity to work in Egypt since 2018. We started with the FAO funding project on training sessions. I think the ministry is really interested in setting up a water accounting unit. And the first period were more on piloting and trying to understand the need. And then we moved to a second project, which is the Water Stars activity, where we move from training to training cooperation, meaning there is not a professor and students. We all have knowledge and to share and to learn from each other. So we work together for the achievement of a goal. We had many sessions together also in the Netherlands, and we learn by doing. by addressing a specific problem and analyzing remote sensing data together. And we apply this to a particular case study. So we work on the Fayoum and we want to understand how water resources conditions are there, how agriculture is changing, and what we can do to mitigate some of the major issues. So to conclude, I think it's important to invest our energy and our minds in different aspects. So if we want to really get access to water, we need to also have access to accurate data and information, and accurate knowledge and technology to achieve our SDG goals. Thank you very much.